Hey guys, Twix Music here, and we are back with another philosophical video. And today we're going to be exploring cynicism, specifically ancient cynicism and modern cynicism. And we are going to be talking a lot about Diogenes with my special guest here, Kitkat. So how we are going to be structuring this video is I'm going to be talking about cynicism to Kitkat, and Kitkat is going to ask me questions about cynicism, and he's going to establish his points of views with my questions to him overall about his thinking of cynicism. What questions might you have, Kitkat?
All right. I guess first of all, I want to know who started it. Who's the founder or founders?
There are considered two founders. There is Diogenes, who is well known for being the founder, and then there was an Athenian went to Socrates' school, and Diogenes was a disciple to him, and he helped establish the Cynicism ideology.
Interesting. I guess kind of like how Buddha first learned all about how formed his kind of faith and philosophy over seeing the suffering of others. How did Diogenes find the motivation to begin that?
By getting kicked out of his town.
He got kicked out?
Yeah, he got kicked out of his hometown. And that's where he found the inspiration to make this philosophy of cynicism, or ancient cynicism to be specific. How he got kicked out is him and his father made counterfeit coins in the economy, and they were both banished. And that's when Diogenes started venturing around and had inspiration because he felt differently about society and how society was run. He walked around with ragged clothes, a bowl, and a knapsack.
And then you said that he had, what was it, like a niece or like a student of his who was related to Socrates that's considered the other founder, I believe?
Yes, he was a disciple of Antiseptity. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he was a disciple of his, and he was an Athenian in the Athens city who previously went to Socrates' school, and he was considered a Stoic. He and Diogenes both founded Cynicism.
Interesting.
Diogenes is the most notable for implanting his philosophy.
Gotcha. Okay, so I guess since we're on that kind of note, I am curious, so cynicism, what is like the actual like definition, or just like a grounded point so that we dummies that don't understand this can understand it better?
The definition of ancient cynicism is someone who does not value things in society such as fame or money or value or materialistic items, and it's someone who ventures through nature, seeks discomfort, and feels like that society in itself cannot make you happy, and only nature in totality can make you feel happy. And therefore you should pursue nature, not society, and not what society can offer.
Okay. And I guess even though he was like ragged and he definitely had more opportunity to be with birdies, obviously the birdies couldn't go around telling people about the wonders of cynicism. How did it like spread around and become like a common thing in, say, like his hometown, for example?
He was a very odd man. He expressed it very differently from other philosophers. He is definitely unique, as he never had intellectual conversations with people. And he lived in something similar to a bathtub that was created from a wine jar. He expressed his philosophy through what we see as inappropriate, but through his eyes were appropriate, such as urinating on other people and masturbating on trees. And he would also defecate on the ground. Wait,
so he would just defecate on the ground like a dog?
Yeah, exactly like a dog, because that's where his philosophy is rooted within the dog.
Oh, did he have like a pet dog, or how did that animal come into all this?
He was surrounded by dogs all the time. Cynicism comes from the Greek word kunikos, which means dogs. Because a dog sits and sleeps wherever it wants, and it takes food from anyone who offers, or anywhere they can get food. And a dog also defecates on the ground. And you might be wondering, why did Diogenes do all these things?
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth, Nate. Tell me why.
Because that's how he expressed his philosophical ideology. He didn't like society, he criticized society, and so he broke all of the social norms. And that's what he aimed to do, was to break all of the norms and say, hey, I want to be a part of nature. I think that nature is where you can manifest happiness. Screw society and what it has to offer. And so he never cared about other people's opinions. When he urinated on people, he did not care at all.
Okay. All right. So again, sometimes truth really is stranger than fiction. Because like if someone were to tell me like a day ago, or even just like a few minutes ago, that the guy who invented modern day cynicism, or I guess ancient cynicism that translates to modern day, was a guy known for masturbating on trees and peeing everywhere he likes, I would have probably looked at you as if I were a 13th century farmer discovering Bitcoin. By the way, it's a scam. Don't get into it. You know, you said that this man was often very much ridiculed and, for his, his anti-authoritative behavior. Did he ever appeal to like any of the criminals at the time with his actions, or did his word like oh man, this guy's like doing all sorts of breaking the rules? Like, did his name kind of like go around after that point?
Yeah, because it was just so odd that a human would do that, and everyone else was conformed to society, like everyone else was traditional or normal. So that spread all around the area during the ancient Greek times before Christ. That's how this guy's Diogenes' existence was known.
Let's say years down the line, as he was like getting older, and did his philosophy, so to speak, became more well known. Was there like other people that began like urinating on bones and all that stuff too, or did they like practice it in different ways?
He did have a group of people that would follow him. They would walk in nature nakedly, which people compare that to counterculture in the 60s. And he had a group of people that would find their happiness in nature as Diogenes showed it in his actions.
Okay.
There's a great interaction of history that I want to speak upon, but between Diogenes and someone very special in history.
All right, I'm listening.
Alexander the Great met Diogenes.
Okay.
And Alexander really admired him.
Wait, so Alexander the Great admired the guy that pissed on bones?
Yes.
Okay.
And Alexander went to Diogenes, and Diogenes was bathing in the sun. And Alexander said, I will do anything you wish for me to do. And that was Alexander showing him his respect to Diogenes, and also showing Diogenes that he has power, because he said he will do anything. And Alexander was in front of Diogenes, and the sunlight was blocked. And Diogenes said, get out of my sun.
Wait, so he just basically gave him the ancient equivalent of the middle finger. Basically just like, he could have like done everything. He could have even said, okay, strip naked and join me. But instead he's just like, get out of my face kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of makes sense, because like Diogenes was a man who had a blatant discontent for authority, right? So obviously seeing this guy in all this like, nice outfit begging to do anything for him wouldn't really mean anything, because it's like, so what? I don't care what you think. That's my whole philosophy, right? I mean, it sounds like a lot of what the ancient definition required was a lot of independence, was like a very heavy value of that. Would I be correct in that assumption?
Could you elaborate a little bit?
Like, in terms of him, like, needing, like, you said that everyone, like, reliant on nature. So, it's like, when you're saying that, do you mean that he's, like, that it's necessary to use nature's resources and form groups like that? Or is he saying, because, like, remember, society is typically judged as, like, a group of people that have established systems and norms. And you said that he had followers. So it's like, doesn't that create its own, albeit less sophisticated society if he is within the guise of nature? So was his definition more about like society's needs of nature? Or is it more about the value of independence and reliance on oneself when you say like screw society?
I would say it was insulting how society was structured with authority, and how people found happiness in materials and purchasing things and having fame and money. I wouldn't say that he had followers. He just had people who wanted the same thing as him and were inspired by him to go into nature and live off of nature's resources and have discomfort and not use bowls and not use cups. Do you understand what I'm saying?
So he's less so criticizing the concept about society itself and more so criticizing the way that it's currently set up. So like if society relied more on kind of nature and was more similar to the way things were before Mesopotamia and before the Romans and the Greeks, then he probably wouldn't have had that same discontent as he did when he was alive.
I feel like there's really no way to envision society in what Diogenes would be satisfied with. I would imagine for people to not have any comfort with modern inventions, I think he'd find more enjoyment with that. I want to talk about something else that's including Diogenes.
Okay.
So you know how Diogenes, he sought out for discomfort. He didn't desire materialistic things. He's very much against it. He used to carry around a bowl, and in that bowl he would use to drink water. And he saw a homeless boy who was drinking water out of his hands cupped like this. And so Diogenes, he felt like a fool at that time because this boy was using his hands and he was using a materialistic item. And do you know what he did then?
Probably scrapped the bowl at that point and just told the kid, good job.
He smashed the bowl on the ground.
Yeah, it seems like smashing things was very common back then. Yeah, especially when it came to like, you know, with the whole like Moses and the Ten Commandments, you know, and how it's like he used the Ten Commandments to destroy the bull when he, or, you know, the giant golden calf. So I just kind of find a funny parallel there.
You were asking me how does ancient cynicism translate into modern cynicism?
I was, yeah. I'm very curious about that.
There was a Roman who was alive after Diogenes' death. He found a lot of disrespectfulness in his writings. And because he was a Roman and Diogenes did things that were not appropriate in his eyes, he called Diogenes disrespectful and labeled him as arrogant and a fool. Then hundreds of years later in the Renaissance, people found that Roman's writing and they used that against people who criticized others but didn't have anything of meaning to say. And so the Renaissance used that to use the term cynicism to address people that they didn't like or that disrespected them. I feel like it was very contradicting that people labeled their rivals or people who disrespected them as cynicals, because those people that they criticized with the word cynical were people who did have materialistic items.
Yeah.
Which contradicted Diogenes.
Right, so it's just because like you were even saying how Diogenes was a very like resented figure at his time. I mean, sure, he got like praise from figures like the king and Alexander the Great later, but like for the most part, when he started, like many revolutionary people of his time, or even before and after, he was always someone who was very, from what I'm gathering from you, is that he was someone who, you know, was not very popular in the public eye. So I'm wondering if like, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm wondering that if they were focused more so on the image of Dionysus more than what he was actually teaching when they were using the Renaissance like format of that idea.
Could you elaborate a little more?
Okay, well, for example, if I found a guy, went over and pickpocketed him, and my goal was to say how money, and he didn't learn about the pickpocket until like say a few minutes after, and he was buying something, right? And I was doing that to everyone in New York City, for example. I'd probably not only get several, you know, beatings from that because, you know, they want their cash back, but if I did that to show, hey, this is how valuable money is when it's not contributing to a societal ideal, like saying that money's only as useful as you make it to be. Because like that guy was able to walk by without a hint of difference without that cash in his pocket, right? People would probably be more focused on me being the a-hole who just stole their cash rather than the fact that I'm trying to teach them that money isn't as valuable as you think it is. So I'm curious if that in the Renaissance definition, how do you say his name again? Diogenes, thank you. If Diogenes like was the person taking the pockets, you know, basically like they were so focused on hating this guy for, you know, like this guy keeps urinating on me, he won't get off my property, he's really annoying. And if people in the Renaissance have been trying to describe, like, oh, you're being a Diogenes right now, was more so what they were going for when they were like doing that.
I would agree with you on some parts
Okay.
of what you're asking. They didn't insult people based off of solely on Diogenes, but the main reason of how Diogenes was portrayed as a disrespectful person was because of how that particular Roman, who I think his name was Lutheran, wrote him in his writings. That aged to being an insult of cynicism.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's less about the fact that it's solely Diogenes himself, and it's more so the way that he was perceived by this, Lutheran figure, right?
Yes.
Okay, I see. Thank you. I was just kind of confused on that. Now I understand.
You did say before that he was popular. We could both agree that he was popular in a negative way.
Mm-hmm.
And while most people in society didn't consider his actions, they looked at him and they said, that's weird. They didn't compare that to philosophy. Plato did, because them and Plato were polar opposites, and they had a rivalry. They did not like each other.
What I know about Plato, that does not surprise me.
Diogenes went into his lectures a lot and devastated on the ground once.
Yeah. So, he just saw him on stage, just widened his legs, it's just and basically, he just, he forced them to watch him disrespect him in front of everyone he was inspired by. Please tell me, were there any more historical figures that he had interactions with? This could be a whole show on itself.
I don't believe there's any more.
Oh man, yeah, he sounds fun. He sounds fun to research and look at.
Yeah, I had a fun time studying him because he is just so different from all other philosophers that we know of.
Clearly. So ancient kind of had it meaning his original definition, that being, the importance of relying on nature and less on, man-made goods. And then you have the Renaissance definition being cast in a negative light, I believe, right?
Yes.
How else did the definition develop through time?
The Renaissance definition has now developed into the modern meaning, with the disrespectfulness still showing it in a certain aspect. A person who is cynical in modern time would be someone who believes that every single person, except for them, is self-righteous, and their actions are doing things only to pursue oneself. And they believe that everyone's intentions are bad, and that they put this whole shield around themselves and are just have that mindset about every single person. And most of these people who are modern cynics have been emotionally traumatized. They put the whole barrier of cynicism around them just to protect themselves. As we grow, we do become cynical, and I believe that that's a bad thing. For example, you apply for a job. You apply for this job and then someone else gets the job and you don't. You can be cynical then and say, oh, I guess I shouldn't apply for this type of job. As I can see, I'm certainly not qualified for it. That's when cynicism would show. And people don't even identify as cynics, show cynical actions. And I believe that that's just a negative mindset, and that's not what people should be doing.
Okay, so how would, say, something like modern-day cynicism differ from pessimism?
It's extreme pessimistic thoughts, or a pessimistic ideology, especially of how you're pushing everyone and categorizing everyone. You don't even know these people. You didn't even have a close conversation with this person. How do you know that they're motivated by their self-interest? It's very pessimistic. It's very negative.
So the two definitions, despite being different, they're very, they're under the same tree. Kind of like fruit of the same tree.
I would agree, but modern cynicism and ancient cynicism are very different just because of Roman Lutheran and the Renaissance people, of how they transferred those two meanings.
Yeah, because it's you kind of see bits and pieces of Dionysus' modern day world. For example, you have the Green Day Party, one specifically talks about environmental issues and the importance of nature. You have things like the Wiccan faith that talk about, once again, being in tune with, nature and its various surroundings, right? And, funny enough, ancient gods once were very common back then as well, polytheism versus monotheism. With the whole BC, AC thing, with Christianity one prominent big first, along with Buddhism, and obviously Judaism. It's there are modern day definition, his ancient definition does still find its way in the modern day world with those kind of ideas, My question is, how come we've grown so attached to the Renaissance definition when it completely contradicts what he was, when it not so much contradicts, but more so just distracts from what he wants to say?
It's the power of how a historical figure can change the meaning of somebody else's just because people see him as such an authority or as such a great inspirer or a great person to read their works on. It just shows you how much power that person can have in their literature and how a society or a certain time frame can change, something that can be positive in a certain aspect is something that's very negative.
Okay. Do you think that his choice to defecate on people's lawns and shoot his seed all over their trees, did that positively or negatively influence? Because you have figures like Alexander the Great that admired this guy, and after everything he's done, despite society kind of playing into that, kind of trying to change it, relating to Diogenes, would you say that Diogenes himself more accurately embodied his own definition, or how others judged him by that logic?
I think that he pursued his own definition, but because of how society is structured, people couldn't really understand his philosophy and what he was trying to portray just because of the actions that are embedded into our rules of society. I do think that society did have more power to it, but luckily with this information, we know what he was trying to accomplish. We know his philosophy, we know his intentions and why he did the things that he did. But certainly society did have a lot of contribution to what they cannot understand from him.
I mean, I guess it's kind of like the chicken and the egg question, because it's on one hand, you have society creating so many things such as social and economic desperation in people. You have things like the housing crisis and economic basis inflation. They're all directly contributed to society's handling and the people in charge. Yet at the same time, though, if you never had those factors in the first place, you would have never had Diogenes and his influence. So it's kind of like the chicken and the egg question. Did it come from the chicken, in this case, the whole overarching branch of society that led to the egg? Or was it his egg that led to many of these modern contributions of society itself?
I can see where you're coming from with that. I really like your analogy. My question for you is, what is your own opinions on ancient cynicism, on how the meaning was changed, and what your thoughts on modern cynicism?
Well, I actually think that Diogenes kind of had the right idea on certain fronts. Obviously, I'm going to disagree with him that no modern day contributions are made. Because in case you noticed, I don't want to get smallpox or polio. I preferred, to have those modern day. Because, without modern day society, you wouldn't have things like longer birth rates, more sustainable drinking water. Heck, if it weren't for society, people, kind of like how you were mentioning, how Diogenes was actively defecating everywhere and everywhere. It's Romans were one of the first groups to later, during the BC AC period after this, to actually have a working water canal and facets like that. So I think that there were positives both then and now, because back in the 1800s, as disgusting as this may sound, people used to defecate in prominent lakes back in Great Britain, and the only thing that stopped this wasn't people's own goodwill, it was the incentive of law from society. But at the same time, you have things in society like climate change and things such as wealth, poverty, and social disparity that do contribute major problems here. So I think that Diogenes had the right idea, but the wrong execution. Because I think that just by simply just kind of doing whatever he wanted, he saw the boy with cups in his hands, but he never thought that, unlike that boy, I chose to be here. I may have been banished, but I could have easily just gone under a different name. This boy was likely in poverty. And I just think that if Diogenes had truly understood how that really could affect other people and how many don't often choose his path, even if they follow it indirectly, I think that if he would have had a little more social awareness like that, he could have spread his message much farther. Kind of like how Aristotle, despite everything he had ever done, he always knew how to weaponize his silver tongue and use it to truly land impact. Martin Luther King was able to utilize his weapon, in this case his silver tongue, and Nelson Mandela were both able to do that to help redefine severity. I mean, Harvey Milk, for Pete's sake, in recent years was able to do that with civil rights for gay people and LGBTQ plus community, right? So you see all these figures that utilize society as a tool for what they're making, kind of like how many tycoons can use it to hurt people. And I think that while Diogenes had the right idea that we don't need to rely everything on society and that we can find satisfaction through looking at a nice day or having a meaningful conversation like we have, I think that his approach of solely defecating and making everyone your enemy except for the extremists made his message much weaker than it would have been if he had tried to go on this other route of having these intelligent discussions. So I think he had the right idea in the wrong place. You understand what I mean?
I totally understand what you're saying. What is your thoughts on the philosophical term and the philosophy as a whole was transferred?
I mean, I think that it was translated about as well as a French dub of Dragon Ball Z. Because I think that they completely missed the point of what he was saying. Kind of like my whole analogy with the pockets earlier. Obviously, don't steal. Bad message in general. But like, in terms of this, I think that by solely taking this one figure's word and not looking at the full context, not doing their research, I think that that really put a bad name on what was otherwise a very valid philosophy that could, realistically translate to many parts of our own world today. Especially with environmentalism being more crucial than ever to our Earth. We need this place to live after all, and I think that he definitely had a good point that there are some beautiful things in society. I mean, nature hikes, camping. I mean, even something as nice as looking in your backyard and seeing some trees, or a nature preserve. All of those things kind of embody Diogenes' philosophy of the beauties of nature, but they still exist within the confines of society. So I think this is just one of those examples where if people had looked at the full picture instead of just the part they wanted to see, I think his message would have landed much harder than it did, within the modern day definition of cynicism. So I don't think it translated well, but I do understand why they reached the conclusion that they did. And I think Diogenes, even if I don't think I would do everything that he would do, I can absolutely see where he was trying to get with his mindset. I just wish that people could have picked up on that.
What about your view on modern cynicism?
I think that there's a difference between being pragmatic and cynical. Because here's the thing, there's a time to be constructive, and there's a time to try to empower yourself to go further. Because sometimes the most unwinnable battles can be fought not with cynicism, but with optimism. And better yet, with sometimes constructive criticism. Because it's like, you look at those figures, Martin Luther King Jr. with the March on Selma, they were able to move past the years of discrimination and cruelty and dehumanization. These people were still able to inspire so much. And if they had tried to use the modern definition of cynicism, saying, well, we're just kind of inherently unequal. We're just inherently not able to exist or rule or have any sense of worthwhile in society, I don't think that would have worked. Plus, I think that modern day cynicism, especially when its whole origin is made out of spite and hatred for another person, when ironically, I think that Diogenes actually wasn't really much of a modern day cynic, because he could have easily just seen these people pelt him with bones and say, oh, well, I can't do this anymore. I can't piss on bones anymore. I can't inspire people anymore. Or if he would have saw Alexander the Great, it's like, oh crap, my entire philosophy is compromised. I have to stop. I can't do it. Kind of like what you were saying earlier about modern day cynicism. I think that would have really weakened some of our positive contributions in modern day. Even Roosevelt, there was a prominent moment when he had a threat. He was even shot in the chest, and it was his own speech and glasses that saved his life. And if he had embodied modern day cynicism, he would have never gone up there and helped with many prevalent issues, including preserving our national parks. And it's just kind of I think that, ironically, that Diogenes is not really a modern day cynic. Because the definition, despite being made for him, doesn't describe him an elitist, because, if anything, he seems to be one of the most prevalent optimists in our day. Because he pushed so hard for what he believed in, even if it misguided or otherwise, for what he wanted. And it got people's attention. It made it last. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I think that you've been educated by a new philosophy in two different terms.
Yeah, thank you. I had never heard of Diogenes or learned about him in history class, or I never even knew the modern day definition of cynicism. So thank you for giving me this insight. I'm glad that you were able to share this with me.
We're glad to have you on this philosophical talk show and discussion.
I guess I'll just break off from here, eh, buddy?
All right.
Dink.
Dancing with the devil, tonight's our first recital. His hands on my hips, he takes control of my movement. Couple of minutes pass and I don't know what I'm doing. Just dance to the